Hello friends, this will be everything you need to know before you watch season 5 of Better Call Saul. Alright, let's go! The series follows Saul Goodman, who's the dodgy lawyer from Breaking Bad, but actually it's a backstory about how he became that dodgy lawyer, because you see his real name is James McGill. And he used to be a really good con artist, until his brother Chuck got him to change his ways and work at his law firm, called HHM. At first James, or Jimmy, was practically working as a janitor, but he quickly passed his bar test and became a real lawyer. But he couldn't get a job as a lawyer at his brother's law firm because his brother's partner, Howard, said no. And he used to date this woman by the name of Kim, but things didn't work out after he got rejected by the law firm. Years later he's working as a public defendant, but that's barely making ends meet. So he instead tries to go back to scamming people, and that leads him to accidentally trying to scam Tuco Salamanca, a crazy nutjob that only really cares about his abuela. Anyways, he really wanted to kill Jimmy, but his friend Nacho talked him out of it. So now Jimmy owes Nacho Cheese a favor, and Nacho Cheese quickly wanted to cash in that favor by having Jimmy help him rob the Kettlemans. The Kettlemans basically robbed the city of $1.6 million, so Nacho Cheese didn't have any problem robbing them of their money since they wouldn't have anywhere to go. Jimmy then says no to helping Nacho Cheese, and then goes and warns the Kettlemans that they're in danger. The Kettlemans then go into hiding. But with my man Mike Ehrmantraut's help, Jimmy's able to find him, so they give him a portion of the money to keep him quiet. And with that money, he's able to kickstart his new law firm. And he decides that he wants to help old people write their wills and deal with whatever plagues them, since old people love him for some reason. While helping his new client, Jimmy stumbles upon a huge case. But in order to deal with his case, he needs the help of his brother and his law firm, which is the perfect time to talk about his brother Chuck. You see, Chuck in recent years has developed a huge fear for electricity, where he believes that electricity makes him sick. But in reality, Chuck is just losing his mind. Anyways, when Jimmy brings the case up to Howard and Chuck, Howard refuses to have Jimmy on the case. But in actuality, it was his brother Chuck who didn't want him on the case. So in anger, Jimmy leaves and starts to con people with his old friend. But that quickly ends when his friend dies when they were conning somebody. Jimmy then gets a call from Kim telling him that he could come back on the case, but a different firm will be working it and they want to work with him, which would have been the best thing that could have happened to him. But a few days before that, Jimmy and Mike stole the $1.6 million that the Kettlemans stole from the city, and that was money with no strings. And instead of keeping it, like I would have, Mike and Jimmy returned it, which Jimmy regrets because the season ends with him saying that he won't make a mistake like that again. Season 2 starts with Jimmy almost making that same mistake by not accepting the new job offer from the new firm. But luckily his new girlfriend Kim was there to help him get to his senses and take the job. But because Kim is helping Jimmy, Howard and Chuck at HHM basically demoted her and won't budge no matter how good a job she does. And back to Jimmy and his new job, he actually gets fired because he cuts way too many corners, and they realize that he's a little dodgy. And even though he loses his new company car, he gets to keep his sign-on bonus, which he uses to open an actual firm. And while he's opening up his new firm, let's catch up with Mike, who's actually been working as a bodyguard for this dummy by the name of Daniel. And surprisingly, Daniel sells his drugs to Nacho Cheese, who's doing this without the knowledge of his boss Tuco. But after a while, Daniel and Nacho Cheese have a falling out, during which Nacho Cheese realizes that Mike is dangerous. So he hires Mike to kill his boss Tuco Salamanca, but Mike says no and instead puts Tuco in prison. But Tuco's uncle by the name of Hector didn't like this, so he instead makes a deal with Mike, giving him $50,000, and in return Mike gets Tuco's sentence reduced. But Mike really doesn't like Hector, because Hector threatened his granddaughter, so he goes to put Hector on a shirt. Before he can do it, he gets a mysterious note on his card telling him don't, which brings us back to Jimmy and Kim, who now have their own law firm. But Jimmy once again cuts a lot of corners, but this time it's to help Kim with the big case that she's been working, which is basically this bank called Mesa Verde signing on to HHM, but the case was led by Chuck at HHM. So Jimmy goes and changes the address to make it look like Chuck made a mistake. So Mesa Verdes leave HHM and instead joins Kim, because they believe that Chuck and HHM are unreliable. And Chuck believes that his brother Jimmy has something to do with it, and in order to prove that his brother Jimmy did something, he came up with a plan, which is to make himself look crazy so his brother Jimmy would confess to switching up the address. And surprisingly enough, it worked, so Chuck now has a recording of Jimmy confessing to changing the address. And that takes us to season 3, which picks up right at the end of season 2. But with Chuck realizing that the tape that he just recorded of his brother confessing has no use in public court, he comes up with yet another plan. And as you know, his plans always turn out the way he wants them to. This time it's no different, and his plan this time gets Jimmy arrested for breaking and entering, which was something Jimmy did in order to destroy the tape. But sadly for him, he's taken to trial by his brother, where two things happen. The first is that Chuck's mental illness is now made public, which is something that discredits him and his law firm. The second thing is that Jimmy is no longer allowed to practice law for a year, which leads him to creating his famous persona of Saul Goodman. And at the time, what Saul Goodman basically does is create commercials for small businesses. Anyways, remember how in season 2 somebody told Mike not to kill Hector? Yeah, that somebody turned out to be Gus, the owner of Los Pollos Hermanos. And he basically doesn't want Hector dead because if Hector dies, that means he would die. And his chicken shop is just to help him run some drugs. So anyways, Gus and Mike come up with the plan to set up Hector and his ice cream shop. And the plan is basically to get Hector's drug business stopped at the border. That way he would have to rely on Gus and his chicken shops to move his drugs. Which is exactly what happens. But since Hector hates Gus and his guts, I'm sorry, I had to. He goes to Nacho Cheese and his father Dorito in order to run his business. His name is not really Dorito, but just know he's Nacho Cheese's father. Anyway, since Dorito doesn't want drugs being ran through his business, he says no. But Hector doesn't like that, so he threatened to unalive Dorito. And since Hector told Nacho Cheese this like a dummy, Nacho Cheese comes up with the plan to get rid of Hector. And that's by making Hector look like he had heart failure, because he found out that Hector took these pills to regulate his heart, so he swapped them for some fake ones. And just like Nacho Cheese wanted, Hector's heart failed, but sadly he lives. Anyways, now that Jimmy's almost broke, he goes back to one of his old clients, makes her an outcast among her friends because she wouldn't accept the settlement, and forces her to accept the settlement, that way he will get paid a large sum of money. But he quickly regrets this when he realizes that he destroyed what's left of her life. So in order to right the wrong that he just wrote, he intentionally revealed that he manipulated all of his clients, which solved the issue that he created, but now old people hate him. At the same time, Kim, who has been working day and night, falls asleep at the wheel and crashes. But luckily for her, she only broke an arm and got some scratches. Which brings us around to Chuck, who was sadly forced to retire after his illness was made public. But at the same time, he realizes that his illness is only in his head and tries to overcome it. But sadly, mistakes were made, because he realized that electricity was running in his house which he can't find the source to. He decides that enough was enough, and the season ends with him starting a fire in his house. Which finally brings us to season 4, where we find out that yes, Chuck died. Before he died, he did tell his brother that he hated him. So Jimmy had no problem getting over his brother Chuck's death. But since Jimmy's in need of money and his brother Chuck cut him out of his will, Jimmy starts selling burner phones to criminals. And while he's doing this, he goes by the name Saul Goodman. Even though his girlfriend Kim is against this, she's slowly becoming a mini version of him, because she's also cutting corners the same way Jimmy would, and is really loving it. Which brings us to the story of Gus and Mike. You see, after Hector Salamanca is hospitalized, a new Salamanca comes to replace him, by the name of Lalo Salamanca, which doesn't make Gus too happy because he wants to get away from the cartel, but not to live a clean life, but instead because he wants to run his own drug business. So he flies in a bunch of German engineers to get them to build him a secret meth lab, and he leaves Mike in charge of the engineers. At the same time though, Lalo Salamanca really wants to know what Gus is up to, and since he knows that Gus and Mike are working together, he starts following Mike. Gus on the other hand finds out that it's Nacho Cheese who set up Hector Salamanca, so he uses the punishment of Nacho Cheese to make it look like a rival gang hit him. That way he could take out the rival gang, which he does. At the same time though, one of the German engineers, after about a year working underground, wanted to have a vacation, so he runs away and does exactly that. But doing so puts himself, Gus, and Mike's life in danger, because Lalo Salamanca is chasing the guy down in order to find out what Gus is up to, which he almost does, but Mike is able to find the engineer before Lalo. Mike is then forced by Gus to permanently put the engineer to sleep. And now back to Jimmy, who's now able to practice law again, after a hearing where he plays on everyone's emotions in order to get through to them. He then reveals to Kim that it was all an act, and sadly for Kim, she believed the whole act, which probably means that Kim's trust for Jimmy has plummeted, and the season ends with Jimmy saying that he's changing his name, most likely to Saul Goodman. And yeah, I hope I answered all your questions, but if you have any more, be sure to leave a comment. That's it. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you liked that video and want to see more like it, leave a like and subscribe. Adios!